Have you ever wondered why tithing is such a significant topic in the Bible? Why did God command His people to give 10% of their harvest? And how does this ancient practice apply to us today? Whether you're confused about the concept of tithing or want to understand how it benefits the church and the community, this video will answer your questions. We're diving deep into what the Bible says about tithing, exploring the passages that explain its purpose and how the tithe was used in the house of God. So if you've ever asked yourself, why should I tithe? Where does it go? What if I don't tithe? You're in the right place. Let's uncover the biblical truths together. 1. Tithing in the Old Testament, a command from God. Tithing wasn't just a suggestion, but a command from God that helped the Israelites recognize Him as their ultimate provider. Leviticus 27:30 NIV lays the foundation. A tithe of everything from the land, whether grain from the soil or fruit from the trees, belongs to the Lord. It is holy to the Lord. Here, God establishes the principle that a tenth their produce, whether crops, fruits, or livestock, was holy and belonged to Him. This act of giving 10% wasn't merely an obligation, but a sign of reverence for God's provision. Deuteronomy 14:22-23 NIV further explains the practice. Be sure to set aside a tenth of all that your fields produce each year. Eat the tithe of your grain, new wine and olive oil, and the firstborn of your herds and flocks, in the presence of the Lord your God, at the place He will choose as a dwelling for His name, so that you may learn to revere the Lord your God always. The Israelites would take this portion of their harvest to the place God chose for worship, reminding them to acknowledge Him and live in a posture of gratitude. 2. The purpose of the tithe. Support for the Levites and the needy. So what was the tithe used for? The Bible shows us that tithing had two main purposes: supporting those who ministered in God's house and providing for the less fortunate. First, the tithe was given to support the Levites, the tribe responsible for priestly duties. They had no land of their own, so their livelihood came from the contributions of the people. Numbers 18:21 NIV says, I give to the Levites all the tithes in Israel as their inheritance in return for the work they do while serving at the tent of meeting. By contributing to the Levites, the people ensured that the temple could function and the spiritual leaders were taken care of. This same principle applies today. Our giving helps sustain the church and its ministries. But the tithe also had a social purpose. God commanded that a portion of the tithe be used to help the vulnerable, widows, orphans, and foreigners. Deuteronomy 24, verse 19-21, NIV speaks to this. When you are harvesting in your field and you overlook a sheaf, do not go back to get it. Leave it for the foreigner, the fatherless, and the widow, so that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. This practice ensured that those who were struggling had provisions, reflecting God's heart for justice and mercy. 3. Tithing as a spiritual discipline of gratitude and trust. Tithing wasn't only about providing for the Levites and the needy. It was also a powerful spiritual practice that helped the Israelites cultivate gratitude, and trust in God's provision. Deuteronomy 14:23 tells us, so that you may learn to revere the Lord your God always. By giving the first and best portion of their produce to God, the Israelites expressed their dependence on Him. Tithing was a regular reminder that everything they had was a gift from God, and by giving, they were putting their faith in His continued blessings. 4. Application in the house of God today. So how does this Old Testament principle apply today? In ancient Israel, the tithe was used primarily for three purposes. 1. Supporting religious leaders. Just as the Levites were supported by the tithe, our giving today helps sustain pastors, ministers, and church workers. 2. Caring for the needy. Tithing continues to be a way we can support ministries that serve the less fortunate, both locally and globally. 3. Worship and celebration. The tithe was also used as a form of worship, reminding the people of God's blessings. Similarly, our giving is an act of worship, honoring God with our resources. Conclusion: why tithing still matters. Tithing in the Old Testament was more than a financial transaction. It was a way to worship God, sustain His house, and care for the needy. The principles of gratitude, trust, and provision still hold relevance for us today. As Christians, giving is not just about meeting a quota or fulfilling an obligation. It's about recognizing God as the source of all we have and participating in His work here on earth. Whether through a tithe or other acts of generosity, we are called to be faithful stewards of the blessings God has given us. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions about tithing or giving, feel free to leave a comment below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video so others can also understand the biblical truth behind tithing.